For 3,000 years, the question refused to die. It drifted through the halls of ancient star empires, echoed inside the marble chambers of the Galactic Council, and lingered in the whispered conversations of smugglers hiding at the edge of civilized space. Why did no one ever attack humanity? Entire civilizations had risen and fallen without discovering the answer. The records were strangely incomplete. Military archives contained gaps stretching back centuries. Fleet logs ended without explanation. Entire campaigns had been erased from official history, replaced with a single classified designation that even the highest-ranking admirals were forbidden to access. Omega Black. Every species had a theory. Some believed humans possessed a hidden fleet capable of destroying galaxies. Others insisted Earth had signed an ancient pact with beings older than the stars themselves. A few dismissed the stories entirely, claiming humanity's reputation had simply grown larger than reality through centuries of myth and exaggeration. Yet one fact refused to change. Pirates raided every trade route except human territory. Empires conquered worlds by the hundreds, but never crossed Earth's borders. Even warlords who feared nothing would quietly alter their navigation routes rather than provoke a human patrol. It wasn't diplomacy. It wasn't fear. It was something far older. Something no living civilization could fully remember. Across the Orion Arm, young officers graduating from prestigious military academies often laughed whenever elderly instructors warned them about humanity. Never challenge a species whose wars you cannot find in the history books. To them, it sounded like another outdated legend. The galaxy had entered an age of unprecedented peace. The great empires controlled millions of systems. Artificial suns illuminated entire sectors. Planet-sized shipyards forged fleets so vast they blocked out constellations. What threat could one blue world possibly represent? Curiosity slowly transformed into arrogance. Arrogance became confidence. And confidence became ambition. Far beyond the civilized frontier, inside the obsidian command chamber of the Orion Dominion, the Empire's supreme strategos studied a holographic projection of Earth rotating silently against the darkness of space. A small planet. One insignificant star. One species. Nothing more. Around him, generals debated probabilities with absolute certainty. No defensive alliance. No active wars. No territorial expansion. No visible deterrence. The conclusion appeared obvious. Humanity's legend was empty. The galaxy had spent centuries fearing ghosts. The strategos allowed himself a faint smile. If every civilization refuses to ask the question. He slowly stood from his throne. Then history rewards the first one that does. The invasion order spread across thousands of star systems in less than a minute. Shipyards awakened. Planet cracker cannons charged. Carrier groups assembled in absolute silence. Millions of soldiers prepared for what military analysts confidently predicted would become the shortest campaign in Dominion history. Throughout the galaxy, encrypted intelligence networks intercepted unusual fleet movements. Merchants quietly rerouted convoys. Veteran captains cancelled long-standing contracts. Ancient races that rarely spoke to outsiders simply closed their borders without explanation. No warnings were issued. No protests reached the council. Only silence. A silence so complete, it felt unnatural. As the first Dominion battle fleet crossed the final jump gate toward Sol, countless observers watched with anticipation. Some expected the fall of Earth's greatest civilization. Others expected another forgotten chapter in galactic conquest. None of them realized they were about to witness the single greatest mistake ever made by an interstellar empire. Because humanity had never been left alone by accident. And in just a few hours, the entire galaxy would finally discover why. The first light of Sol spilled across Earth's orbit like liquid gold, reflecting from thousands of orbital habitats that circled the planet in perfect harmony. From a distance, humanity's homeworld looked peaceful, almost fragile. Blue oceans shimmered beneath drifting clouds, while sprawling cities glowed faintly beneath atmospheric shields. To outsiders, Earth appeared unprepared for war, a civilization content with prosperity rather than conquest. But appearances had always been humanity's greatest weapon. Aboard the HSS Dominion, Captain Elena Voss stood alone before the command deck's panoramic viewport, her hands clasped behind her back as she watched Earth slowly rotate beneath the battleship. The polished steel beneath her boots vibrated with the steady heartbeat of the ship's fusion core. Around her, holographic tactical displays floated silently in the dim blue light, projecting orbital traffic, civilian evacuation routes, and encrypted fleet communications that scrolled faster than any ordinary human could read. Despite the growing tension, the bridge remained almost unnaturally calm. No one shouted. No alarms echoed through the corridors. No frantic officers rushed between stations. Each member of the crew carried out their responsibilities with practiced precision, as though they had rehearsed this exact morning 1,000 times before. In many ways, they had. For generations, every officer in the human stellar navy had trained for a day no one truly believed would come. The day someone ignored the warnings. The day someone chose to invade Earth. Lieutenant Marcus Hale stepped quietly beside the captain, studying the tactical display. Tiny crimson markers blinked into existence beyond Pluto's orbit, each representing an enemy fleet emerging from hyperspace. "There are more than expected," he said softly. Elena barely moved. "There always were." Her calm voice carried no fear, only quiet certainty. Outside the viewport, civilian transport ships continued their orderly descent toward protected orbital shelters. Families boarded evacuation vessels without panic. Children waved through reinforced observation windows, unaware that history was about to change forever. There was no chaos because there had never been uncertainty. Every citizen knew the protocol. Every pilot knew their route. Every soldier knew their place. Humanity had spent centuries preparing, not because they wanted war, but because experience had taught them that peace survives only when someone is willing to defend it. Far beyond Earth's orbit, deep space sensors continued tracking the approaching armada. Thousands of enemy warships. Carrier groups. Planetary assault cruisers. Siege platforms large enough to eclipse entire moons. Their formation stretched across millions of kilometers, turning the darkness between the stars into a wall of steel. The Orion Dominion had not come to negotiate. It had come to erase a civilization. On countless alien worlds, live broadcasts carried the unfolding crisis across the galaxy. Analysts predicted Earth's surrender within hours. Military experts compared fleet numbers and unanimously reached the same conclusion. Humanity was hopelessly outmatched. No civilization, they argued, could survive an assault of this scale. Not even the legendary humans. Inside the command center, Elena finally broke her silence. Status. One by one, officers answered. Orbital defenses online. Planetary shield stable. Evacuation complete. Fleet formation standing by. Each report ended with the same quiet confidence. Ready. Elena closed her eyes for only a moment. She remembered the stories told by her grandfather, a retired admiral who had once looked into the night sky and said, "The day they come for us isn't the day we should fear. It's the day they'll finally understand why no one came before them." At the time, she thought it was simply an old soldier's pride. Now, standing on the bridge of humanity's flagship as the greatest invasion fleet in recorded history approached Earth, she finally understood what he meant. She opened her eyes. The stars beyond the viewport seemed impossibly still. Then, in the silence before the storm, she gave the order every captain had trained their entire life to speak. Hold formation. Let them come. The first enemy shots arrived without warning. Across the black ocean of space, thousands of crimson beams erupted from the Orion Dominion's forward batteries, cutting through the darkness like rivers of molten fire. Planet cracker cannons discharged with terrifying precision, their energy signatures flooding every sensor aboard the HSS Dominion. A heartbeat later, the void itself trembled as the opening barrage crossed millions of kilometers toward Earth. Every officer on the bridge watched in silence. No one flinched. Captain Elena Voss stood motionless, her eyes fixed on the tactical display as countdown timers raced toward zero. The polished deck vibrated beneath her boots, not from fear, but from the controlled power of defensive systems quietly reaching full capacity. Outside the massive viewport, the stars disappeared behind a storm of incoming weapons. Then, the first impact. A blinding wall of white-blue light engulfed Earth's orbital shield, expanding across the planet like a second sun. The explosion was so brilliant that observation satellites automatically dimmed their optical sensors to prevent permanent damage. Shockwaves rippled through space, scattering debris from abandoned satellites and sending abandoned cargo containers tumbling into endless darkness. For a single breath, no one could see Earth. Across the galaxy, billions watched the live transmission. News networks declared the beginning of humanity's final battle. Military analysts nodded grimly. No planetary shield survives that level of firepower. The human fleet will collapse within minutes. The war is already over. Even inside the Orion flagship, cheers erupted across the command deck. The Supreme Strategos watched the expanding cloud of plasma with quiet satisfaction. Continue bombardment. His voice carried absolute certainty. Break their orbit before the ground assault begins. Another wave followed. Then another. Thousands of warships fired in perfect synchronization, transforming the battlefield into an ocean of burning light. Carrier groups released endless swarms of strike fighters that surged toward Earth like metallic locusts, each carrying enough firepower to reduce entire cities to ash. It was overwhelming. It was merciless. It was exactly what every military doctrine recommended. And yet, something felt wrong. Lieutenant Commander Varric, one of the Dominion's most experienced tactical officers, frowned at his sensor display. "Sir." The Strategos didn't look away from the battle. "What is it?" "The shield." "What about it?" "It isn't weakening." Silence. Varric recalibrated every scanner aboard the flagship. Again. And again. The numbers refused to change. Energy output. Stable. Structural integrity. 100%. No fluctuations. No failures. No sign of collapse. The impossible became undeniable. "Direct all batteries to the same impact zone," the Strategos barked. "Hammer it until it breaks." Entire battle groups shifted formation, concentrating enough firepower to sterilize continents. Another wave crashed into Earth's defenses. The shield shimmered. Nothing more. No cracks. No overload. No desperate emergency broadcasts. No retreat. Only a calm blue glow stretching across the planet like an unbreakable horizon. Back aboard the HSS Dominion, Elena Voss watched the tactical feed without changing expression. Around her, officers quietly updated reports. Shield efficiency holding. Civilian casualties, 0. Enemy fighter wings entering interception range. Every voice sounded almost routine. Almost ordinary. Lieutenant Hale finally broke the silence. "They've committed everything." Elena gave the smallest nod. "They believe victory belongs to whoever fires first." Outside, the Orion fleet continued pouring unimaginable destruction into Earth's defenses, convinced that overwhelming force would eventually prevail. They couldn't understand the silence waiting on the other side. Across neutral space, ancient civilizations watched with growing unease. Some elders lowered their heads. Others quietly left the viewing chambers altogether. They recognized something younger species did not. Humanity wasn't fighting back. Not because it couldn't. Because it hadn't decided to. And that realization sent a chill through races old enough to remember forgotten legends. For the first time since the invasion began, the attackers started asking themselves a question far more terrifying than how to defeat humanity. They began wondering. Why were the humans still waiting? Then the impossible happened. Not on Earth. Not within the Orion fleet. But in the empty darkness between them. For one long, unsettling moment, every weapon in the battlefield seemed to lose its meaning. Sensor arrays across thousands of warships began reporting impossible gravitational fluctuations. Navigation computers flashed errors no engineer had ever documented. Long-range scanners detected mass where there had been only vacuum seconds before. At first, Orion commanders assumed it was electronic warfare. Then entire constellations vanished. The stars themselves appeared to blink out, swallowed by expanding circles of absolute darkness that spread silently across the battlefield. Space seemed to ripple like disturbed water, bending light into impossible shapes. Massive fractures of shimmering blue-white energy stretched across the void, as though reality itself had begun to crack under an invisible force. Panic spread through the Dominion fleet. Multiple spatial anomalies detected. Unknown signatures multiplying. Our scanners can't identify the contacts. Captain Elena Voss watched the phenomenon from the bridge of the HSS Dominion, her expression unchanged. Around her, no one looked surprised. Human officers calmly monitored incoming data while encrypted channels lit up with authentication codes that had remained dormant for centuries. One after another. Every code was accepted. Every clearance was confirmed. The protocol had finally begun. Across the galaxy, emergency broadcasts interrupted every military network. Ancient civilizations that had remained silent for millennia suddenly activated forgotten observatories buried beneath mountains and oceans. Elders rushed into sealed archives that had not been opened in thousands of years. When the first visual images arrived, entire governments fell silent. The fractures in space widened. From those impossible gateways emerged shapes so enormous they defied comprehension. Warships larger than moons drifted forward with deliberate, effortless grace. Their hulls were neither smooth nor mechanical but carved with glowing patterns that resembled ancient constellations etched into living metal. They carried no visible engines. No exhaust. No weapon batteries. They moved as though space itself carried them. Thousands followed. Then tens of thousands. The battlefield disappeared beneath an ocean of colossal vessels whose origins predated every known civilization in the galaxy. Their hulls bore a single emblem. A silver circle surrounding a blue world. Earth. Inside the Galactic Council chambers, delegates stared in disbelief. One elderly ambassador from the long-lived Seraphim species slowly collapsed into his chair, trembling uncontrollably. "I know that symbol." His voice was barely above a whisper. "No. It can't be." The council demanded an explanation. The old ambassador closed his eyes, as memories buried beneath centuries of silence resurfaced. "My ancestors spoke of them. The custodians. They were never conquerors. They were guardians. Thousands of years earlier, when civilization had nearly destroyed itself during an age of endless interstellar wars, an ancient alliance had chosen one young species to inherit the responsibility of protecting intelligent life, not ruling it. That species had been humanity. The alliance eventually vanished into history. But their fleet remained. Hidden beyond ordinary space. Waiting. Not for conquest. For necessity. Every generation of humans had inherited the same oath. Never reveal the guardians. Never use them for power. Only awaken them if civilization itself stood on the edge of annihilation. The Orion Dominion had unknowingly crossed that final line. Across every human vessel, encrypted broadcasts carried a message older than every living government. Guardian Fleet authorization confirmed. Custodian protocol active. Defensive mandate accepted. On the Orion flagship, the Supreme Strategos stared through the viewport as one colossal Guardian vessel drifted silently into formation before Earth. It eclipsed entire battle groups with its sheer size, casting an endless shadow across the Dominion fleet. For the first time in his military career, the architect of the invasion felt genuine fear. Humanity had never been protected because the galaxy feared its armies. Humanity had never been left alone because of hidden superweapons. The truth was infinitely more terrifying. For 3,000 years, the guardians of the galaxy had been human. And now, they had awakened. The battlefield fell silent. Not because the war had ended, but because every soul present understood that history had just shifted beneath their feet. The colossal Guardian fleet floated motionless around Earth, thousands of moon-sized vessels arranged in perfect formation. They emitted no battle cries. No threatening broadcasts. Their immense silhouettes simply occupied the void with an authority that no empire could imitate. It was as if the galaxy itself had drawn a line across the stars. Captain Elena Voss stepped toward the center of the bridge aboard the HSS Dominion. Every display around her synchronized with the newly awakened fleet. Ancient command codes, older than every modern civilization, flowed across the holographic screens before fading into a single green confirmation. Custodian command accepted. She took one slow breath. Transmit to all Guardian units. Her voice remained calm. Priority Directive 7. Across thousands of ancient warships, dormant intelligences responded instantly. Their systems awakened not with mechanical precision, but with something almost alive. Far across the battlefield, the Orion Dominion opened fire again. Desperation had replaced confidence. Planet Cracker cannons unleashed another devastating barrage. Carrier groups emptied their launch bays. Missile swarms flooded space like rivers of burning steel. Every weapon the Dominion possessed surged toward Earth in one final attempt to overwhelm the impossible. The response came without violence. The nearest Guardian vessel slowly rotated. Across its immense surface, ancient symbols ignited one by one, glowing with a deep blue radiance that illuminated the surrounding darkness. A pulse of silent energy expanded outward, spreading across millions of kilometers in every direction. No explosion followed. No blinding flash. Instead, every incoming missile simply stopped. Every fighter lost propulsion. Every cannon fell silent. The energy that powered the Dominion's invasion dissolved into nothingness, as though the laws of physics themselves had quietly refused to cooperate. Entire battle groups drifted helplessly through space. Weapons were not destroyed. They were simply, no longer weapons. Shock rippled across the Orion command fleet. Our reactors are online. But the cannons won't fire. Missile guidance systems have vanished. We've lost all offensive capability. Panic spread faster than any attack ever could. The Dominion had prepared for superior firepower. It had prepared for overwhelming resistance. It had never imagined facing an enemy capable of ending a war without destroying an army. Captain Voss finally issued humanity's first and only transmission. Every military frequency. Every civilian network. Every receiver in the galaxy carried her voice. Steady. Clear. Unshaken. For 3,000 years, humanity has guarded the peace you believed was natural. She paused. We were entrusted with strength, not so we could rule the stars, but so no civilization would ever suffer extinction through conquest again. Silence filled the galaxy. Then came the final words. You were never spared because we feared you. Another pause. You were spared because we believed you could become better. Aboard the Orion flagship, the Supreme Strategos lowered his head. The realization struck harder than any weapon. Humanity had possessed the power to erase his empire before the first shot was ever fired. Instead, they had chosen patience, mercy, hope. His fleet remained alive only because the humans had valued life more than victory. Around the battlefield, Guardian vessels began restoring disabled engines, stabilizing damaged ships, and opening safe corridors for evacuation, including the very invaders who had come to destroy Earth. No revenge. No triumph. Only restraint. Across the Galactic Council, delegates stood in stunned silence. The greatest military force in history had not won because it possessed the strongest fleet. It had won because it possessed the discipline never to misuse it. And in that unforgettable moment, every civilization finally understood why no one had ever dared attack humanity. It was never because humans were the deadliest species in the galaxy. It was because they were the only ones powerful enough to choose mercy when no one else could. The war became known by many names. Some called it the 11-minute campaign. Others remembered it as the day the Guardians returned. But throughout the galaxy, history ultimately settled on a simpler title. The day humanity's secret was revealed. Years passed, and the scars of that day slowly faded from the stars. The shattered wreckage of the Orion invasion fleet was carefully salvaged rather than abandoned. Human engineers worked beside former enemies, rebuilding navigation beacons, restoring damaged colonies, and reopening the trade routes that fear had once closed. There were no victory parades across Earth. No monuments celebrating conquest. The Guardian fleet, having fulfilled its ancient mandate, disappeared once more into the silent depths beyond known space, leaving behind only unanswered questions and a galaxy forever changed. In the halls of the Galactic Council, the atmosphere was different now. The Grand Chamber that had once echoed with political rivalries and military threats had become noticeably quieter. Delegates who once dismissed humanity as merely another ambitious civilization now paused before speaking. New laws replaced old doctrines of expansion. Military academies rewrote entire centuries of galactic history. The lesson taught to every young officer was no longer about superior weapons or larger fleets. It was about restraint. It was about responsibility. Most importantly, it was about the extraordinary burden carried by those with the power to end wars before they began. Captain Elena Voss never accepted the honors offered by dozens of grateful worlds. She quietly retired from active command, returning to Earth where she often walked alone along the windswept cliffs overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Tourists occasionally recognized the woman whose calm voice had echoed across the galaxy during humanity's greatest trial, but few approached her. She preferred listening to the crashing waves instead of speeches about heroism. One afternoon, a young child sitting nearby looked toward the endless horizon and asked a simple question. "Captain, were you afraid?" Elena smiled gently. For a long moment, she watched the sunlight dance across the water before answering. "Every person who understands the cost of war is afraid." The child frowned. "Then why didn't you fight harder?" She looked toward the sky, where faint streaks of orbital traffic crossed the blue above. "Because winning isn't measured by how many enemies you destroy." She paused. "It's measured by how many lives are still here when the fighting ends." The child quietly nodded, perhaps not fully understanding, but somehow remembering every word. Centuries later, historians would still debate the true origin of the Guardian fleet. Some believed it had been built by an ancient civilization. Others insisted humanity itself had become something greater than any species before it. Countless books were written. Endless documentaries were produced. Yet no theory ever captured the simple truth hidden behind the legend. Humanity had never sought to become the ruler of the galaxy. Only its protector. And perhaps that was why the responsibility had been entrusted to them in the first place. Across distant worlds, children of dozens of species eventually grew up hearing the same story before bedtime. It wasn't a tale meant to frighten them. It was meant to remind them that true strength is silent, that courage is patient, and that the greatest civilizations are remembered not for the wars they win, but for the peace they choose to preserve. Even now, whenever a reckless commander asks the question that once puzzled the entire galaxy, why are humans never attacked? The oldest veterans simply look toward the stars with quiet respect. They smile, because they know the answer isn't written in military records or hidden inside forgotten archives. It's written across every peaceful sunrise, every thriving world, and every civilization still alive to witness another tomorrow. The galaxy was never protected by fear. It was protected by humanity's choice to stand watch, even when no one knew they were there. And somewhere beyond the edge of known space, where the stars burn in perfect silence, the Guardians still wait.